Today I want to talk about 5 things that guitarists very often forget to practice, but that actually make a huge difference. These are the kind of things that usually don't get much attention on technical workout videos, but if you pay attention to them, your playing immediately starts sounding more professional, more controlled, and just more musical overall. One thing I notice very often in lesson is that players spend all their attention on how to execute a specific lick or phrase, which is obviously important, but almost never on what happens right after it, or how it actually ends. It really affects how the listener perceives your playing, because that final note is the last thing they remember. So what I mean by that is, when you finish a phrase, think about what actually happens to the last note. How do you play it? What kind of articulation does it have? Is it short or does it ring out? And if it does, for how long? On which beat does it end exactly? Does it have vibrato or is it completely straight? So next time you practice, try to be aware of every note you play, especially the note length at the ending. Every note and every detail you add should be intentional. Otherwise it will be random and you will not be able to reproduce it when you want to perform it. A great way to practice this is to play a scale, like harmonic major for example, and go through different length options. First one would be all short, just staccato on every single note. Then all having the length of 8 notes. Then dotted 8 notes. And then quarter notes. And so on. You can do this with all different kind of note rates. All those little details matter if you want to improve your technique, your ears, and your overall musicality. You can get the tabs and all the practice files for this lesson on my Patreon page, plus tons of extra exercises and lessons. The second thing I want to talk about is bending accuracy. Some players do practice bends, but they rarely check if they're actually in tune. And you definitely don't want your bends to be out of tune. That's the worst. I've had this situation a lot of times. I would record a good solo take, but the intonation on one bend was just so terrible that I couldn't leave it like that. And since bends are really hard to edit, I almost always end up re-recording the whole section. There was even a time when I kind of avoided bends because it just felt so random if I hit them correctly or not. And it can be really frustrating sometimes, but if you want 100% accuracy, you need to work on it every time you have a bending in the song you're learning, even if it's your own music. I think it's impossible to just practice this one bending exercise and then you're good for the rest of your life, because there are so many different factors you can have. It depends on which finger you use, on which string you play, the position you're in, and many more. Obviously you will get better at it over times in general, but there is always something you can work on. As I said, you would need to practice at least half note and full note bends with all fingers on all strings on every single fret. And since the movement is so similar every time, our brain is not able to memorize that for every single scenario. At least it would take a very, very long time to internalize that. So my advice on this is always practice it for the specific scenario you actually need it for. So here's a way to work on it. First, you need a tuner. Then let's do a quick example. If you have the 15th fret of the B string bending a whole note like this, all you have to do for this exercise is bending the string, then play the note, and then check on the tuner if you need to adjust or if you already are on point. Try to memorize how it feels like and repeat that a couple of times. Then practice the same in the context of the song. Record yourself and listen back. Or better, even double check on the recording with a tuner. What you should not do is bending and then try correct while you're bending the note. That way you don't train the correct execution from the very beginning on, and you will never hit the perfect note right away. The next thing I want to take a closer look at is vibrato. Vibrato is one of the most personal aspects of your sound. It's almost like your own fingerprint on the guitar. But most people never really analyze the vibrato. So what I suggest you is record yourself and listen back in order to hear every single detail and ask yourself a few questions like, is it controlled? Is it even? Does it match the tempo of the song? Does it have to match the tempo of the song? Or is it just random and inconsistent? Is it out of tune? A good way to practice vibrato is to go through different subdivisions. So let's just play this E on the 9th fret of the G string. Now play it with using 8th note vibrato. Now in triplets. Now in 16th notes. And then even quintuplets. You can also practice accelerating vibrato by starting slow and then increasing the tempo bit by bit. And also the opposite. But I suggest you going through the subdivisions first. As you can see, there are so many different aspects you need to be aware of. So my advice is think of how the vibrato for your specific situation should sound like and then practice that. Number 4 is another thing I've learned over the years, the importance of practicing performance. We all know the feeling when you practice a piece and you feel great about it, and then you go on stage or even just play in front of a few people, and suddenly nothing you practice really works and it's just bad. So one easy way to practice this is to play for your family members or a friend on a regular basis. You can even make it a small ritual, like every Sunday you meet up or something like that. Or if you prefer to keep it to yourself, just place your phone in front of you, hit record and play as if you were on stage. That's what I do most of the time. I suggest you to practice running through the whole piece from beginning to end. If you feel like you don't need that because you don't play shows, well, there are obviously a lot of benefits when you practice performing, which means playing a piece from beginning to end, even though you never play a show. That focus, consistency, and endurance is different from looping just short licks or short sections. It helps starting to see the whole song as a bigger picture, and it's a different aspect of practice compared to short, isolated exercises. But especially if you need to play an audition for getting into music school, getting a scholarship, or getting into a band, I highly recommend you practicing performing on a regular basis. And I'm talking about musical performance and technical accuracy, not necessarily about how to look on stage or visuals on stage. That's a different type of performance practice, but I'll talk about that and my experience with it in another video. So we need to train our ability to play from start to finish under pressure, especially for people who are having troubles with that. Then it's even more important to integrate that in your routine. The last topic I want to talk about is something I realized I needed to practice as I started playing more and more live shows. It's about transitioning between sections, including switching tones. It might sound like over-practicing or overthinking, but I honestly don't think it is. Focusing on this really helped me to concentrate more on my actual playing. So set up your gear at home, place your pedalboard in front of you, and practice just these transitions. Figure out the best moment to switch tones on your pedalboard or pickups, and once you've found the perfect timing, repeat that a few times. Then practice the whole piece from beginning to end. To make your practice more effective, you can try turning off the lights and practice in the dark. Stages are often really dark, or the lights come from weird angles, which can get really annoying. And I assure you, you will have the worst time of your life when you realize on stage that you can't see anything and you can't perform. And believe me, I've experienced this a lot of times. Also, one time I even forgot to put in my contact lenses, and it was just like 2 minutes before the show. And I decided to play without contacts and also without my glasses. And especially with strobes and darkness on stage, it is the worst. Everything just blurs out. And since I had practiced a lot by looking at the fretboard, I could only execute the music properly by seeing the frets. So playing without being able to see them like I'm used to made it the worst experience, and I just played really badly. And coming back to the tone switching topic, I couldn't even see which channel was on. And if your monitor mix, or in my case in-ear mix, is messed up, you have basically zero chance to perform well or enjoy the show. Not even 1%. In the end, I can only say be prepared so you don't have to go through this yourself. You might be able to play perfectly, but if you miss a pedal switch or hit the wrong preset, your focus is gone and you'll mess up the performance. Alright, if you found these tips helpful, check out my Patreon page. You'll find more lessons and workouts there, as well as all the guitar profiles to practice all these topics. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.